I've spent all this time keeping my head down, letting the cops do their jobs. I figured playing nice and staying out of their hair was the right move, but it's been years of absolute silence. They haven't accomplished a single thing. I am completely done waiting around. The lead detective running this investigation over in Scurry County right now, he actually looked me in the eye and said he didn't care if it took 20 years to solve. Well, I sure as hell care if it takes 20 years. The monster who harmed my little girl shouldn't be breathing free air for 2 decades. Every dark investigation has a tipping point. That chilling fraction of a second where the lies shatter and the grim reality finally starts seeping through the floorboards. Our story hits that terrifying revelation fast, and when it drops, your blood will freeze. December 27th, 2010, Colorado City, Texas. An isolated, close-knit community of barely 4,000 souls, tucked into the desolate expanse of West Texas, roughly 230 miles past Dallas. It was the ultimate safe haven, the sort of place where nobody bothered turning a deadbolt, where everyone knew your business, and the most intense local controversy revolved strictly around Friday night football. Not a single resident could have predicted their sleepy streets were about to host one of the most twisted, gut-wrenching mysteries the entire state of Texas had ever witnessed. Yet on that bitter, freezing winter morning, an unspeakable horror unfolded behind the walls of a quiet house on Chestnut Street, fracturing the town's innocence and leaving a broken father locked in an agonizing, years-long hunt for his little girl. 13-year-old Haley Dunn was a vibrant cheerleader. She blew the saxophone for the marching band and fiercely competed in volleyball, hoops, and softball. She adored her classes, cherished her social circle, and like clockwork, crossed the street daily just to check in with her father. Brilliant and overflowing with spirit, she was universally described as the absolute heartbeat of that tight-knit neighborhood. Then, in a flash, she vanished. Not a single farewell, no runaway letter, 0 verified footprints left behind, just an eerie silence. But pay close attention, because this singular, terrifying detail rockets this mystery far beyond your standard missing persons file. Detectives eventually cornered the individual most intimately tied to her vanishing, demanding to know exactly where to hunt for the 13-year-old. His response? He casually named a highly specific county, a desolate wasteland more than 20 miles beyond the city limits. The location rolled right off his tongue, completely devoid of stutter or pause. Fast forward several agonizing years, and that exact barren patch of dirt became her graveyard. But the cops had posed one final question back then. They pressed him on his own theories. Who exactly did he view as the prime suspect behind the teenager being snatched? His deadpan reply didn't possess a shred of hesitation. Both of us. You are about to dive into the chilling investigative files of Haley Dunn. It is a labyrinth of dead ends, catastrophic police blunders, and a desperate father who absolutely refused to let society bury his daughter's memory. A decade-long nightmare that yielded only a single apprehension, yet still leaves this traumatized family begging for genuine closure. Keep watching. By the time these credits roll, you'll be haunted by the exact same suspicion that still tortures this shattered community. How on earth does a predator snatch a kid in broad daylight, in a place where everyone knows everyone, and completely get away with it? Grasping the sheer horror of Haley's fate requires rewinding the tape to the very dawn of the nightmare. We aren't talking about the frantic day her dad first noticed her missing, nor the moment the cruisers finally arrived. We must revisit December 27th, 2010, the final hours she spent among the living. Haley spent the bulk of her Christmas holiday, plus the morning after, chilling at her father Clint's place just across the road. Her grandma Connie remembered the teen glowing with an undeniably upbeat vibe, completely obsessed with the fresh Apple iPod she'd unboxed for the holidays. That was just her signature style, radiating pure electricity, undeniably vibrant, and possessing that rare magnetism that brightens an entire room instantly. The evening of December 26th, her 16-year-old brother David crashed at a buddy's pad. Haley opted to stay back, burning the midnight oil on video games. Totally carefree, absolutely routine. Nothing about those quiet, mundane hours offered even a whisper of the impending hell that the next 24 hours would unleash. Dawn broke on December 27th. Right around 5:30 in the morning, Billie Jean Dunn's live-in boyfriend, Shawn Adkins, supposedly clocked out for his shift. His destination was Snyder, Texas, a job site roughly 50 miles down the highway. Fast forward an hour, and Billie Jean dragged herself out of bed, prepping for a grueling 12-hour grind. Right before hitting the front door, she peeked into the teen's bedroom to check on her. There was Haley, sound asleep under the covers. The entire scene felt remarkably ordinary. Billie later swore she figured the kid would just roll out of bed, follow her daily routine, and wander across the asphalt to hang with her father. Leaving behind her only lifeline, her personal cell phone, was a chillingly fatal mistake that morning, meant only to keep her kids connected. 13-year-old Haley Dunn sat completely alone in that silent house. Right there, every shred of normalcy vanishes, because miles away in Snyder, the sinister gears were already turning. Shawn Adkins clocked into his workplace at roughly 6 o'clock in the morning. If you believe his version of events, merely 10 minutes passed before a massive blow-up with management ended his employment. Sometimes he claimed he walked out. Other times, he insisted they canned him. His narrative constantly shifted depending on the audience, yet management painted a remarkably sinister, completely opposite picture for detectives. They testified that Shawn simply strolled inside, purchased a beverage, dumped his gear, and vanished. By 6:10, the man was a ghost. Zero shouting matches. Zero drama. He just bailed. Suddenly, barely a half hour after Billie Jean started her shift, a jobless Shawn Adkins was loose, completely untraceable, and speeding straight toward Colorado City. He had endless free time, and an unguarded 13-year-old girl was sitting in that quiet house on Chestnut Street. The events that followed absolutely shattered this terrifying investigation wide open. Shawn insisted he left Snyder and made a beeline for his mother's place in Big Spring, supposedly borrowing her laptop to file for jobless benefits. He alleged he killed several hours there before finally cruising back down into Colorado City. His alibi placed him home around 3 o'clock. He swore he laid eyes on Haley near 3:15, moments before her alleged trek to her dad's. That was the official alibi. At a glance, it seems completely watertight, save for one glaring, fatal flaw. Digital footprints never lie. Cellular pings from his own device unraveled a far more sinister reality. Between 6:35 and 6:56 that exact morning, his signal bounced off a Colorado City tower almost 50 miles outside Big Spring, striking dangerously close to the very property where Haley sat unguarded. Pings proved he ultimately reached Big Spring, yet not until 9:38, a full 3 hours past his supposedly direct morning commute. Furthermore, he remained grounded there until 2:40 in the afternoon. Crunch those disturbing numbers. Departing at 2:40 for a 40-mile drive means it is physically impossible for him to have crossed paths with Haley by 3:15. His sequence of events is pure fiction. It never added up, and detectives sniffed out the deception immediately. Simultaneously, back within Colorado City limits, the teenager's father, Clint, carried out his regular afternoon routine, fully anticipating his little girl's daily knock on the front door. She never missed a visit. Whether pre-homeroom, post-classes, or merely popping in for a quick hug, that daily connection was his absolute bedrock. However, on December 27th, the entryway remained sealed. His screen stayed entirely dark. As daylight bled into dusk, that typically peaceful quiet morphed into a suffocating, terrifying sense of dread. Near 2 o'clock, an eerie digital message dispatched from the device Billie sacrificed for her teenagers. It pinged one of Haley's close pals. 4 chilling words. "What are you doing?" Her buddy left it on read. That text might be the final digital heartbeat radiating from her orbit. Nearing 4 o'clock, the missing girl's sibling, David, approached the property. He rattled the main knob. Deadbolted. He pounded on the wood again and again, met only with silence. Acting on teenage instinct, David breached a side window to gain entry. Inside, he caught Shawn Adkins lurking dead center in the corridor. David recounted the man's expression as utterly paralyzed by terror, completely panicked and disoriented, resembling someone totally blindsided by an unexpected intruder breaching the perimeter. Later that night, Shawn retrieved Billie from her shift. Upon returning to their Chestnut Street residence, the teenager was missing. Panic setting in, Billie demanded answers. He smoothly claimed the teen hiked toward her father's residence, intending to crash overnight at Mary Beth's house. Clint forcefully shattered that lie, His daughter had not stepped foot near his property that entire day. Is greater than. That summed up my agenda. Eventually I returned, probably near 3 o'clock. I walked in to find Haley chilling in front of the television, so I headed straight back into the master bedroom. She popped her head in, mentioning she was heading to her dad's before crashing at a buddy's spot. She headed out. After that, I chilled by myself for roughly 60 minutes tops. Eventually, David dragged a buddy over. I poked my head into his room while they were gaming. Then Billy dialed my line, explaining her coverage arrived, allowing her to clock out ahead of schedule. Consequently, I pulled into the Snyder Hospital around 6 o'clock to grab her. We drove home and hit the mattress pretty quickly. Is greater than. And throughout that entire window, you firmly believed she was safely sleeping over elsewhere. A missing child. A timeline that makes absolutely no sense. Right. When exactly did she claim she was heading out? You mean when the kid took off? Correct. Well, I figure she headed out the door somewhere around 3 or maybe 3:30. Happened right after I showed up. I cannot give you a precise clock reading on it. Is it standard for her to touch base? Or does she routinely drop off the radar for this kind of stretch? Honestly, going radio silent is not unusual for her. She frequently crashes overnight at her buddy's place without giving a heads up. Always figures to show up by dawn. Yet, when Billy reached out to that friend's household the next day, their response was chilling. The girl never arrived. They anticipated no sleepover. 0 arrangements existed. Once detectives stepped inside her personal space, the official narrative shattered into pieces. Every single item remained untouched. Her wardrobe hung perfectly undisturbed. All personal effects sat exactly where they belonged. Whatever a 13-year-old packs for a weekend trip was glaringly left behind. Not a single toothbrush was missing. The teenager never stuffed a backpack, nor did she bid anyone farewell. 0 arrangements were made. She was just wiped from existence. Authorities were not notified until the late hours of December 28th, an entire 24 hours post-disappearance. Cops initially brushed it off as a rebellious teen fleeing home. That fatal misjudgment would eventually spark fierce outrage from reporters, detectives, and furious locals. Because this kid never ran away from anything. This 13-year-old adored her classes and her father, religiously visiting his place across the road every afternoon until that terminal blackout date. A vanishing youth in rural America triggers instant shockwaves. It strikes right at the core. The trauma is shared. Down in Colorado City, Texas, the nightmare materialized before sunrise. As rumors swirled about the 13-year-old failing to return, this close-knit population of 4,000 mobilized exactly how rural folks do. They rallied together. Random citizens, next-door families, shopkeepers, teenagers, they flooded the pavement, desperate to track her down. Civilian crews quickly formed hunting grids. Missing posters plastered every utility pole, retail glass, and public notice board across Mitchell County. Civilians scoured the asphalt, swept vacant properties, and tackled terrain the local badge wearers could never clear solo. This fierce local uprising proved the enduring spirit of rural America. Every soul ached to locate the girl. The whole county prayed for her safe return. Everyone apparently, excluding the very adults residing at her final known location. Her biological dad, Clint Dunn, hit the streets daily. Pure, unstoppable desperation. He dug through trash bins. He stalked the back streets, scouring every conceivable square inch of the city his boots could carry him to. Witnesses from those initial dark hours noted his agony bled through every action, his dragging steps, his frantic stares at random vehicles, and his absolute refusal to quit long after pure exhaustion set in. He refused to rest until his daughter was recovered, a fact glaringly obvious. Yet onlookers started catching on to a chilling, suspicious divide. Billie Jean Dunn, the kid's own mother, played nicely for the cameras. She fielded reporter questions. She did her televised bits and passed out papers downtown. However, once the manhunt shifted toward the desolate, rugged outskirts beyond city limits, those massive pastures, the dense thickets, those vast, unforgiving West Texas badlands, where a body could easily be swallowed whole, Billie stayed firmly back. Her excuse? Walking that wilderness meant facing the horrific reality that they were hunting for a corpse, not a surviving teenager. A handful bought that emotional defense. A massive chunk of folks saw right through it. Which brings us to Shawn Adkins. The guy never touched a missing poster. He never stepped foot on a rescue grid. 0 doors were knocked on by him to check if a neighbor spotted the teen. As the entire town tore itself apart hunting for the kid, the final individual to allegedly witness her breathing ghosted the entire operation completely. He dodged the poses. He avoided the civilian helpers like a plague. Furthermore, he gave detectives a wide berth, unless forced. People clocked that evasion. Whispers ignited, and the shadow of suspicion permanently stuck, hitting the 9-day mark on the hunt for the missing teen, and the trail remains ice cold. Dropping by the family residence earlier today, state law enforcement was actively tearing through her private space. Panning the camera this direction, you are looking directly at the glass pane leading to her sleeping quarters. Sources say the Rangers turned up 0 evidence of foul play, yet absolutely nothing suggests she grabbed her stuff and fled the nest either. Over a week deep, and she is still a ghost. Her mother calls the agonizing uncertainty unbearable, yet she clings to a chillingly passive narrative, hoping the teenager just walked out and will eventually wander back home. She insists without this desperate delusion, her entire world would completely shatter. Is greater than. Right now, local investigators claim they are hunting down multiple active leads. Multiple task forces joined the hunt, offering $25,000 for any information uncovering the missing girl. 4 days into the nightmare, on New Year's Eve, a completely baffling event shocked Colorado City to its core. A raging bash erupted right at the Chestnut Street residence, the exact same property where the teenager had mysteriously evaporated just hours prior. Crowds mingled and music blasted as the bizarre festivities stretched deep into the midnight hours. Her mother would later claim total ignorance of the holiday, insisting relatives only dropped by to provide emotional comfort. Meanwhile, directly opposite that house, the girl's father stood freezing on his porch, gripping binoculars as he scoured the pitch-black shadows for his lost child. He stared at the flashing lights. He absorbed the deafening laughter. In a truly agonizing twist defining this dark saga, he eventually revealed to the press the exact nightmare consuming his thoughts. He expressed absolute disbelief that anyone could throw a celebration while his little girl remained untraceable, completely vulnerable to the bitter freeze of a Texas winter. That chilling visual, an anguished dad surveilling the street while a wild gathering raged steps away, permanently cemented the public's sinister view of the tragedy. Behind the scenes, the official manhunt was rapidly escalating. By January 4, 2011, federal agents alongside the Texas Rangers fully embedded themselves into the baffling vanishing act. Bringing in that kind of heavy firepower proved local cops no longer viewed this as a standard runaway scenario. Over 100 giant signs displaying the teenager's face and tip lines dominated highways throughout Texas and surrounding areas. The mystery exploded nationwide after fiery television personality Nancy Grace broadcasted the details, interrogating the mother live on her network. Almost instantly, this grim small-town disappearance transformed into an obsession dominating televisions from coast to coast. Is greater than. You appeared on national broadcasting, and the host came at you pretty aggressively. How did it feel listening to that intense interrogation? Is greater than. Well, I caught wind of it later. I missed the live broadcast because state investigators were grilling me, but hearing those vicious accusations is beyond infuriating. Her wild allegations are insane, though I brush them off. My solitary focus remains tracking down the kid and bringing her back entirely unharmed. Is greater than. Does it sting knowing the public fiercely suspects you, a person who supposedly loves the girl? Is greater than. Absolutely, it cuts deep. It genuinely does. Is greater than. Walk me through the actual dynamic between you and the teenager. Honestly, we shared a fantastic bond. I care for her deeply, and I'm convinced she felt the exact same way. We never experienced any major issues. Is greater than. Look, is there anything more the public should understand regarding your underlying connection to this household? Because right now, extremely dark rumors are completely flooding every single online forum out there. Is greater than. Right. Well, between the four of us, everything was perfectly normal. I swear I would never lay a finger on that defenseless child. She means the absolute world to me, and my only prayer is that she is found alive. is greater than, is greater than. Then, on January 5th, merely 24 hours after federal agents intervened, the mother suddenly kicked her boyfriend out. Insiders claimed this wasn't exactly shocking, given their highly toxic romance and constant cycle of breaking up and getting back together. However, the underlying dread this time felt entirely unprecedented. Detectives were finally circling closer, unearthing disturbing domestic secrets that painted a deeply sinister reality far beyond the initial story fed to the public. Journalists and cops quickly realized the daily atmosphere inside those walls had been dangerously chaotic for years. Whispers emerged of relentless alcohol abuse, constant wild adult gatherings, and a highly unstable environment completely unfit for raising adolescents. A prominent reporter tracking the mystery later noted horrific tips describing a residence where reckless adult impulses completely eclipsed the basic safety of the kids. That's when detectives began aggressively digging into the couple's notoriously turbulent past, searching for hidden motives. The red flags they uncovered were already painfully familiar to the local precinct. About 10 months prior to the vanishing, patrol units had responded to a vicious domestic blow-up at that exact address. Both individuals actually dialed 911 on one another during that single chaotic evening. Responding cops documented the scene as intensely hostile, dangerous, and teetering on the edge of sheer violence. Death threats, a powder keg ready to blow. Before the squad cars even pulled up, the real nightmare had already begun. Is greater than, need to call in a tip. Is greater than. Walk me through exactly what is going down. We split up 2 days ago. Now he is swearing he is going to murder me, promising to make it a slaughter nobody will ever forget. Is greater than. We have got a massive problem here. My ex just swallowed a huge handful of my prescription anxiety meds. Must have swiped them from my stash. She claims she downed a whole bottle of her own painkillers. On top of it. Now she is threatening suicide because she called the cops claiming I threatened her. She was just spiraling over the breakup. She is totally out of her mind right now. Is greater than, you threatened to take her life. Is greater than, son of a bitch. Is greater than, Billy is finished. Is greater than, Jesus. He has not stopped all day. Fine. Is greater than. But against all logic, they kissed and made up, just like they always did. Shawn unpacked his bags again, and the dark charade at the Chestnut Street house resumed. As detectives dug deeper, Haley's inner circle started dropping bombshells. Multiple friends confirmed the teenager was absolutely terrified of Shawn Adkins. To her, he was not a stepdad. He was not family. Friends swore she was chronically on edge whenever he was in the room. Is greater than, the creepy stuff she would whisper to me about that guy. Is greater than. Like what? Is greater than. She despised him. The trust was completely non-existent. She was petrified of him. Is greater than. Is greater than I have to get out of this house. Let me crash with you. Something is so wrong here. Is greater than. That was to her grandma. Connie eventually dropped a chilling piece of evidence regarding a secret the teenager had shared. She confessed that night after night, in the dead hours of the morning, a dark figure would stand completely still outside her bedroom door. It paralyzed her with fear. Billie Jean tried to paint their dynamic as buddy-buddy, but the folks actually paying attention knew a much darker truth. Detectives pivoted, zeroing in on the digital footprints, financials, and cell data tying Shawn and Billie Jean to the grid. What those pings and receipts revealed completely shredded their carefully constructed alibis. The first glaring hole? Shawn's supposed employment status. He swore up and down to the cops that his Snyder boss had canned him. Except the manager blew that lie wide open, testifying that Shawn clocked in, grabbed a beverage, dumped his work gear, and vanished into thin air. By 6:10 in the morning,
when confronted with this, Shawn admitted he had lied about being fired.
Shawn finally confessed to making up the termination. His excuse? He did not want the grief of Billie Jean screaming at him for quitting. Sure, that covers one falsehood.
But the cell phone data
GPS tower logs exposed a far more sinister secret.
Fired.
From 6:35 to 6:56 that exact morning, his mobile hit off a beacon dead center in Colorado City, the exact spot Haley sat completely unsupervised. He was not in Big Spring. He was not commuting on the highway. He was right there in Colorado City. Even though the digital trail eventually caught up to him in Big Spring hours later, he did not pull into town until almost 9:40 in the morning and lingered around until 2:40 in the afternoon. More damning than that, separate network pings tracked his device roaming through Scurry County later that afternoon. To anyone else, that is just a random blip on a map. But for the task force, it was a massive red flag. Weeks prior, when they drilled Shawn on potential dump sites, he fired back without skipping a beat. Scurry County. He threw out that exact location before dogs hit the ground, before a shred of proof existed, way before a body was ever recovered. He gave up the spot before anyone even asked. The real jaw-dropper came when agents looked him dead in the eye and asked who they should actually be hunting for this crime. His response sucked the air right out of the interrogation room. Both of us. Lie detector tests were slapped on Billie Jean and Shawn right out of the gate. Examiners had to trash the initial results entirely because both suspects showed up completely blitzed on substances. Billie blamed her altered state on heavy doses of legal nerve pills. Round 2 was not much better. The needles jumped wildly, signaling major deception from both parties on crucial trigger questions. Shawn straight up ripped off the wires and stormed out twice, dubbing the entire probe a massive witch hunt. He barked that the cops were railroading him into a false confession. Yet, when he actually played ball, the few responses that registered as pure truth were the most blood-curdling details of the entire case. 2 suspects cornered in Scurry County, yet an unsettling question lingered: why were detectives completely paralyzed, lacking the concrete proof to lock either of them in a cell? The grueling hunt dragged on. Day after day, local volunteers refused to abandon the search. Giant billboards plastered the state highways, while somewhere buried in the frigid, desolate plains of West Texas, the dark truth of Haley Dunn's fate lay waiting to be unearthed. Is greater than. Thank you all for gathering here today and granting me the floor to finally speak out. First and foremost, I need to talk straight to Haley, just in case my voice can somehow reach her. Sweetheart, wherever you might be trapped right now, I am hunting for you. Hundreds of us are tearing the world apart to bring you back. We just need you home safe and sound. I am absolutely dying to hold you and see your gorgeous face again. I love you so deeply. I am desperately begging for you to come back to me. Not a single minute passes without me praying, weeping, and aching to see you walking into our living room. This endless agony of not knowing your exact whereabouts or if you are even safe is completely destroying me. You are absolutely the most beautiful girl to ever exist, and I am eternally grateful that God picked me to raise you. To whoever might be holding my little girl hostage out there, I am pleading with you to release her right now. Just let her walk away unharmed. Leave her near a sanctuary, a campus, a precinct, any populated place with a telephone so she can finally dial the authorities or reach her family. I have faced people looking me dead in the eye and branding me a complete liar. Strangers are whispering twisted theories about my role in my own daughter vanishing, or accusing me of shielding the guilty party. They claim I am burying evidence and actively fighting the detectives. Every single one of those rumors is an absolute fabrication. Yet here I am, forced into a corner, having to shield my own reputation against absurd allegations, vicious gossip, and complete character assassination. Is greater than. In the dark labyrinth of any criminal manhunt, a chilling pivot occurs. The focus heavily shifts from chasing phantoms to examining the sinister clues hiding in plain sight secrets, just waiting for a detective to finally strip away the veil. For the Haley Dunn mystery, that terrifying breakthrough materialized the second authorities breached the residences of the 2 primary individuals anchoring this twisted saga. The horrors waiting inside didn't merely stir up wild suspicions. They completely derailed the original narrative and forced the entire manhunt down a far more sinister path. As the grim weeks bled into January and February of 2011, investigators operated in the shadows, painstakingly reconstructing the disturbing reality Haley endured daily. To the untrained eye, the Chestnut Street property blended perfectly into Colorado City. It was a mundane, forgettable structure, the exact type of suburban shell you'd ignore completely on your daily commute. Yet past that ordinary threshold, crime scene techs were unearthing a nightmare far darker than the quiet local community could have ever fathomed. While tearing through the property, authorities stumbled onto a stash of hard copy documents that instantly set off massive red flags. Billie Jean Dunn and Shawn Adkins had physically generated hundreds of pages ripped straight from the darkest corners of the web. This wasn't exactly light Sunday morning reading. The massive pile of printouts obsessed over notorious mass murderers, unspeakable brutality, and chilling manuals on how to systematically destroy your own relatives. Agents meticulously bagged and cataloged every single sick page they unearthed. Confronted later during interrogation, Billie brushed off the grotesque collection, claiming she and Shawn merely shared an innocent, morbid curiosity for the macabre, desperately arguing that thousands of everyday true crime junkies dig into those exact same gruesome details online. The veteran detectives sitting across from her weren't buying that highly convenient excuse for a second. Yet, as blood-curdling as that paper trail was, it completely paled in comparison to the apocalyptic bombshell authorities were about to uncover next. The true nightmare surfaced on February 24, 2011. Almost 2 agonizing months post-disappearance, investigators unearthed something so vile, it entirely shattered the town and flipped the case upside down. Buried deep inside a thumb drive, pulled straight from the Chestnut Street crime scene and mirrored on a separate hard drive over at Shawn's mother's house, cybercrimes units decrypted a digital vault so stomach-churning that the briefing went straight to the very top brass of the task force. Between the 2 targeted locations, the terrifying visual horde clocked in at over 100,000 individual files. Every single one of those digital nightmares depicted the severe, graphic exploitation of innocent youth. The sheer mind-numbing scale of this digital depravity was enough to make hardened veterans sick to their stomachs. We aren't talking a handful of twisted photos. Over 100,000 pieces of illicit media, easily accessed in the exact same rooms where a little girl actually slept. Just let the horror of that reality sink in. 100,000. Yet, in a twist that infuriated the public, authorities held off on slapping down immediate indictments for that massive digital stash at the time. The sickening evidence was quietly handed over to a grand jury for deep legal scrutiny. The county's top cop took to the podium, desperately trying to explain the massive legal landmines stalling the immediate arrests. Multiple people shared those addresses, creating a legal nightmare. Detectives had to prove exactly whose fingers accessed those dark files before making a single arrest. By the book, it made total legal sense. Yet for the grieving relatives and a furious public, watching suspects walk free felt like an absolute slap in the face. Then came a bombshell revelation from the victim's dad, Clint, an exposed secret that threw gasoline on an already raging inferno of outrage. Once cops confiscated a computer and locked it inside headquarters, the suspect's stepdad allegedly stormed in and demanded the machine back. Shockingly, Clint claimed that right in the thick of a homicide probe, police handed this critical digital trail directly back to the suspect's family. Did that mind-boggling police blunder sabotage the entire hunt? We still do not have a straight answer. To the locals desperate for answers, it felt like just another dirty roadblock keeping a predator out of prison. The hunt kept grinding on until March 17th, 2011, when authorities finally slapped cuffs on someone, just not the monster everyone expected. Detectives showed up at the couple's property at dawn, hunting down Shawn for another intense interrogation. At the front door, the mother swore her boyfriend was completely gone. Cops breached the perimeter anyway with a search warrant, quickly discovering him lurking in the shadows inside. The guy was hiding right there, proving she had stared dead into a detective's eyes and lied. Consequently, Billie Jean was dragged out in handcuffs, hit with charges for blatantly deceiving federal agents. Come June 2011, a judge handed her a suspended 90-day stretch behind bars and 12 months of probation for the cover-up. She rode out that probation over 250 miles away in Travis County, fleeing there with her lover after the local heat got too intense. Packing up and running from the absolute epicenter of a massive manhunt for a vanished little girl, her very own flesh and blood screamed extreme guilt to both law enforcement and the horrified public. Things ultimately fractured between the 2 suspects by 2012. Slowly, the mother began aggressively walking back the fierce loyalty she had previously shown her ex. She eventually admitted to the press that as the months bled away, and both state police and the FBI zeroed in on her former partner, she realized he was entirely capable of slaughtering her kid. Attempting to justify why she shared a bed with him while her little girl remained vanished, she faltered. Yet she conceded the dark theories detectives had spun, about his violent nature made total sense now. Meanwhile, the grieving father refused to abandon his hometown. He hunted relentlessly. He aggressively harassed detectives day and night, demanding they keep treating the cold trail like an active crime scene. The internet became his weapon, flooding feeds with his missing kid's face, completely ignoring typical news cycles to scream her name daily, ensuring she never just became another dusty file in a basement. Her memory was going to haunt this community forever, if he had any say. This absolute obsession ultimately triggered a terrifying breakthrough that nobody on the task force saw coming. But the road to that twisted revelation meant surviving another brutal, agonizing era of dead ends. Years bled together. 2011 faded into 2013, and the little girl remained a ghost. That horrific unknown paralyzed the entire region, haunting the nightmares of federal agents, search teams, and broken neighbors without a second of relief. Everything shattered on March 16, 2013, when a lone hiker stumbled through a desolate patch of Scurry County, Texas, 20 miles outside town near Lake J.B. Thomas. They finally unearthed the terrible truth. Police dispatch lit up with the grisly report. Unidentified bones rotting out by the reservoir. Forensics shipped the skull and fragments straight to a specialized university lab for complex genetic sequencing. By April 26, 2013, the local prosecutor's desk held a devastating piece of paper, an absolute genetic match. Investigators pulled every fragmented bone from the dirt for rigorous autopsies. The lab technicians formally proved the nightmare scenario cops had been dreading for over 24 months. The dead girl in the desert was finally identified. A dead girl hidden in the dust, uncovered in the exact county Shawn Adkins predicted long before any search team even hit the ground. The autopsy confirmed our darkest fears, a cold-blooded murder. Her father, Clint Dunn, revealed detectives suspected a brutal blow to the skull with an unidentified object, though the actual murder weapon remained a ghost. Police lacked a smoking gun, pointing to a clear killer, yet the manhunt suddenly gained terrifying momentum. They finally had a definitive crime scene, a recovered body, and undeniable proof. The tight-knit town of Colorado City, Texas, which clung to false hope for over 2 agonizing years, was forced to confront the gruesome reality insiders had dreaded since day one. Haley was dead, stolen by a monster. For Clint, the revelation triggered a soul-crushing agony that defied all language. Yet it also ignited a fierce, relentless fire within him, transforming a desperate search into something far more sinister. It was now a full-blown homicide hunt. Clint swore he would never rest until the predator who slaughtered his little girl faced absolute justice. In a cruel twist of fate, the family endured 4 more agonizing years just to bury her. Driven by despair, her mother broke her silence. 6 years had vanished since 13-year-old Haley walked away from her dad's Colorado City house and into the shadows. Just west of Abilene, she vanished. They uncovered her bones 3 years later, but the phantom who killed her still roamed free. Watching from Austin, her mother desperately clung to the belief that karma would eventually catch up with the culprit. I try to keep faith whenever they promise a bust is imminent, but agonizing bureaucratic and forensic delays just keep dragging it out. Haley finally received a proper funeral in January of 2017, over 6 torturous years post-disappearance. 6 whole years, and authorities still had nobody behind bars. A unique, suffocating hell exists solely for the relatives of cold case victims. It lacks the quick, clean sting of a sudden tragedy. While that baseline agony exists, this is a creeping rot, a poison that infects your marrow over countless months and simply will not fade. It is the sheer torment of lingering in limbo, helplessly watching seasons pass, while the sociopath who shattered your world breathes free air. It is dialing. Detectives only to be fed the exact same empty bureaucratic excuses you have swallowed 100 times before. For Clint, that psychological torture dictated his every waking moment from 2013 through nearly an entire decade. They located his child. The coroner stamped homicide on her death certificate. Detectives stared dead at a glaring primary suspect, yet calendars flipped with 0 traction, 0 indictments, and 0 closure. I kept my mouth shut and let the cops do their jobs for years. I figured backing off the police was the smart play, but a lifetime has passed with absolutely nothing to show for it. The silence is deafening, and I am entirely done playing the waiting game. The The current Scurry County detective literally looked me in the eye and claimed he wouldn't mind if solving this took 20 long years. Well, I absolutely care. The psycho who butchered my little girl has no business roaming our streets for 2 solid decades. Do you truly believe the killer is still lurking around? Absolutely. I am convinced he is hiding right here in Big Spring, Texas. You really suspect Big Spring? Yeah, I know for a fact he was spotted there 2 months back. Got a specific name? Shawn Adkins. You are pointing the finger at Shawn, the solitary person of interest on record. Dead on. And I guarantee Billie Jean holds the missing puzzle pieces. Her stories shift, she dodges questions, and she is burying a massive secret. Clint refused to let it die. Not for 1 second. He relentlessly badgered the precinct. He fired off endless messages, physically confronting authorities and demanding the ugly truth. When bureaucratic red tape stalled his progress, he pivoted his crusade to a wilder battlefield, the digital frontier. He flooded social networks with constant, haunting reminders of his vanished daughter. This wasn't just an annual birthday tribute, it was a weekly, monthly barrage of psychological warfare, posting her face everywhere. He leaked investigation details to the public. He bled his trauma and vengeance onto the screen, swearing her memory wouldn't just rot away in some forgotten, dust-covered West Texas evidence locker. His digital cries for justice echoed across thousands of screens as the years bled by. Then, in 2019, the algorithm struck gold. An anonymous ghost from the past, a former high school insider, finally saw the truth. What if the missing puzzle piece was ignored for years? Sometime during the sweltering months of 2011, a student stumbled onto Clint's web post. The text unearthed a buried memory, a bizarre discovery made shortly after Haley vanished. Back then, this witness hadn't the faintest clue who the missing girl was. Nobody linked that strange find to the massive search efforts, the frantic headlines, or the vanished teenager. It was just odd roadside trash, completely meaningless junk that warranted 0 second thoughts at the time. Consequently, the police were completely kept in the dark. Not a single soul heard about it until 2019, when Clint's words froze them in their tracks. Instantly, that forgotten debris transformed into a sinister clue. The witness bypassed the cops, contacting Clint straight away to confess their disturbing find from years past. To this day, authorities refused to reveal exactly what was unearthed. Law enforcement locked those files down tight for the active probe. However, what Clint eventually leaked to the press blew the narrative wide open. He claimed the mysterious evidence surfaced in a zone that tracker dogs and search grids had supposedly combed extensively during the initial frantic hunt, a heavily canvassed sector that dozens of deputies and frantic locals had already marked as completely clear. This single bombshell ignited horrifying doubts regarding what other crucial clues were botched during those vital first days, injecting desperate momentum into a mystery starved for justice. While this was unfolding, a shadow player was relentlessly digging through the case files behind closed doors for several years. Enter Private Eye Erica Morris, a relentless sleuth tied to Clint's crusade since the very first days. As seasons changed, Morris took up the mantle, agonizingly squeezing the cops for updates, grooming inside contacts, and hunting down the dark trails that terrified local authorities. She evolved into a fierce, unwavering force, screaming for proper justice regarding the missing girl. Then, during the autumn of 2019, a digital bombshell dropped, dragging her crosshairs straight back to Shawn Adkins. Starting that October, panicked alerts began flooding Morris's inbox from frightened females across the West Texas region. They outlined a deeply predatory cyberstalking campaign orchestrated by a creep who called himself Casey. The moniker instantly set off alarm bells for the detective. Casey was Atkins's legal middle name. This glaring red flag was impossible for her to ignore. She instructed the victims to forward every single piece of graphic media this stalker had messaged them. Upon analyzing the footage, Morris knew in her gut it was Shawn. After agonizing over his profile for a decade, she easily recognized his face. By October 28, 2019, the private investigator escorted a targeted victim straight to the precinct to formally document the cyber abuse. The ensuing interaction became a notoriously infuriating roadblock in an already cursed inquiry. The desk cop flat out rejected their claims. He brazenly called the victim a liar, insisting she was making the entire nightmare up. The department aggressively slammed the book shut, But Morris wasn't about to vanish into the shadows. She drafted a scorching public manifesto aimed directly at both local authorities and the civilian population. Within its pages, she exposed the terrifying allegations, connected the dots back to the Dunn mystery, and delivered a bone-chilling ultimatum. Lock Shawn Adkins behind bars immediately, or brace yourselves for a rising body count. It wasn't a subtle suggestion. It was a blunt, terrifyingly specific prophecy cemented into the public sphere. Yet, the deafening silence continued. Seasons bled together, 2019 dragged into 2020, and still, nobody wore handcuffs. But as 2021 dawned, the game finally changed. Mitchell County's top prosecutor, Ricky Thompson, pulled a massive trigger that violently jerked the stagnant probe back onto the rails. He dialed up an elite task force explicitly engineered to untangle these exact types of nightmares, the legendary Texas Rangers Cold Case Squad. Operating deep inside the Department of Public Safety, this elite crew hunts down dead-end mysteries demanding brutal new scrutiny. They bring immense state backing and raw firepower to shatter the gridlock. These top-tier investigators ruthlessly tore apart the Dunn files. They scrutinized pinging towers, financial trails, lie detector charts, and every seized artifact, the shattered alibis, and the blatant lies that poison the timeline. Analyzing this mountain of corruption alongside the original detectives, they quietly prepped for a massive tactical strike. Investigators finally played a desperate hand, marching into a judge's chambers to forcibly extract a fresh DNA sample from Shawn Casey Adkins. That judicial green light dropped on June 13th, 2021. By sunset that exact same day, a decade of agonizing dead ends, 8 years since discovering scattered bones in a desolate Scurry County wasteland, and almost 11 years since Haley faded like a ghost from Chestnut Street Atkins, was finally in handcuffs. They slapped him with the official heavy charge, the brutal murder of Haley Dunn. Local broadcasts painted a picture of a town practically weeping with sudden raw vindication. Anchors announced the suspect was rotting inside Mitchell County Jail, locked up for slaughtering a 13-year-old girl who vanished over 10 agonizing years prior. For 10 brutal years, locals scoured the earth hunting for a missing child, begging for clues, and starving for some twisted form of retribution. Suddenly, that impossible closure felt terrifyingly real. Word of his capture tore through the neighborhood, lit up Texas, and sent shockwaves deep into the dark corners of the true crime world. The public fallout was raw, instant, and overwhelmingly intense. Armchair detectives and exhausted locals who had screamed for a reckoning suddenly felt an emotion they thought had died a long time ago. A tiny, dangerous sliver of hope. Then there was Clint Dunn, the grieving father who used to grip binoculars on his porch, obsessively watching suspicious gatherings across the avenue. He was the phantom roaming every filthy alley, digging through dumpsters, making endless calls, and refusing to let his little girl's memory fade into the dust. After 11 years of pure psychological hell, his relentless crusade seemingly paid off. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the eerie, hollow calm of a man who had survived a decade of waking nightmares. He confessed that human language couldn't even touch the depth of the vengeance he was feeling. Offering gratitude to the searchers and the advocates, he pivoted to the dark obsession that kept his heart beating. He demanded absolute, ruthless justice behind the locked doors of a courtroom. Haley's mother, Billie Jean, broke her silence too, chillingly admitting she wasn't shocked by the cuffs. She openly confessed to sleeping next to the prime suspect long after her daughter vanished, claiming hindsight couldn't untangle that twisted loyalty. Still, she expressed a grim relief that authorities finally dragged her ex into the glaring light of accountability. The judge hit Adkins with a staggering $2 million bail. That astronomical ransom sent a clear message. This alleged monster wasn't seeing the outside of a cell anytime soon. By December 2021, a grand jury nailed him with murder and tampering, painting a grisly narrative of a fatal strike and a calculated, cold-blooded cover-up. Over a decade of shadows, and suddenly they had a villain, a motive, and a concrete list of felonies. The justice system was finally forced to stare into the abyss of a nightmare they had ignored for way too long, triggering a massive media probe. The local district attorney essentially slapped reporters in the face, handing over just one heavily sanitized page of the arrest file. This singular document named the exact predator accused of extinguishing Haley's life. Cops dragged him in weeks prior, yet the actual smoking gun remained totally hidden. When investigative journalists demanded the full story, the DA aggressively slammed the door shut. They hid behind a convenient state loophole, claiming child abuse statutes legally gagged them from releasing the gritty, disturbing details. 10 agonizing days bled out while investigators waited on a higher political power to force the county's hand. All they held was a flimsy piece of paper authorizing a manhunt for a suspected killer. It offered absolutely zero insight into the twisted trail of breadcrumbs that finally cracked the cold case. The media promised to rip the lid off this cover-up and expose whatever dark secrets the brass was protecting. But in the treacherous landscape of criminal justice, a pair of handcuffs does not guarantee a guilty verdict. Grand jury papers are merely allegations, not absolute truth. Navigating the bloody path from a judge's chambers to a final prison sentence is a mind-bending, soul-crushing marathon. The weary locals braced themselves. Haley's father knew the score, and so did her fiercest advocates. As the courthouse doors locked behind them, everyone tangled in this web was about to realize the nightmare had merely evolved. The vicious war for Haley's soul was far from finished. They hadn't even scratched the surface. Lawyers love tossing around a specific, seemingly harmless bit of jargon that masks an entirely different, deeply sinister reality. A killer walks. Insufficient evidence. 2 entirely sterile, gutless words. Yet, to a grieving family starved for justice for over 10 agonizing years, that legal jargon feels like an absolute gut punch. It echoes like a heavy steel door bolting shut in a pitch-black corridor. It feels like a twisted, suffocating dead end to a nightmare that demanded a real conclusion. By June 2023, that exact phrase buried the Haley Dunn investigation. Following over 10 years of desperate waiting and a bombshell December 2021 indictment, beyond a staggering $2 million bail and explicit homicide charges, and the relentless push from the Texas Rangers Cold Case Unit, Mitchell County prosecutors abruptly dropped everything against Shawn Adkins. They tossed it without prejudice, technically leaving a crack open for future legal action. Yet the grim reality was staring everyone right in the face. Adkins slipped right through the justice system's fingers, dumping a 10-year community obsession squarely back to square one, a chilling, unsolved mystery. The state's rationale checked all the neat legal boxes, while utterly destroying the victim's loved ones in the process. They claimed the pursuit of Adkins relied way too heavily on purely circumstantial clues. Nobody actually witnessed the horrors inside that Chestnut Street home on December 27, 2010. Investigators never recovered a definitive murder weapon linking straight back to their primary target. They lacked that one undeniable smoking gun to convince a jury, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this exact guy slaughtered little Haley. Sure, the mobile pings caught him lurking in bizarre spots at deeply suspicious hours. The lie detector practically screamed foul play. His own twisted words guided detectives straight to the exact county where her remains ultimately surfaced. Still, dark hints do not equal a conviction. And inside a courtroom, hard facts run the show. Yet, one furious detective refused to keep quiet when the state caved, broadcasting a fiercely public message that sent shockwaves through anyone tracking this nightmare. This investigator branded the dropped charges an absolute tragedy of justice, not some minor paperwork glitch, but a total systemic failure. This warning echoed from an insider deeply buried in the gruesome details of the hunt, someone who had stared the darkest clues right in the face, and who knew in their bones they had nailed the right monster, only to watch a broken bureaucracy completely fumble the ball. To Clint Dunn, this collapse was just one more brutal slash in a decade-long psychological butchery. Yet anybody paying attention to this grieving father's relentless crusade, witnessing the sheer hell he walked through, and his refusal to shatter under police incompetence, understood he would never simply walk away. The man spent days staking out properties through field glasses. He ripped through every single trash bin across Colorado City. He hounded law enforcement with such ferocious persistence that his desperate calls literally became official case evidence. You cannot derail a father's wrath with a flimsy legal memo, and he flat out refused to surrender. When the cameras rolled on this project, Haley's slaughter was still flagged as a highly active pursuit by the Texas Rangers. Shawn Adkins' name remains permanently burned onto that primary target list. A $3,000 Crime Stoppers bounty sits untouched, waiting for the exact tip that slaps handcuffs on her killer. The tip lines stay hot. Detectives are still lurking in the shadows. Whispers from the inside suggest fresh eyes are aggressively circling back, armed with new intel and significantly upgraded tech. Billie Jean Dunn, hiding behind her lawyers, absolutely insists she had zero hand in her own child's grim fate. To this day, authorities have not pinned any homicide-related charges directly on her. That dark thread of the web stays completely twisted. Meanwhile, Private Eye Erica Morse keeps digging up dirt. She refuses to abandon the hunt, completely rejecting the state's cowardly backpedaling as the final chapter in Haley's tragedy. Neither has Colorado City, a tiny speck of 4,000 souls permanently haunted by the nightmare born on Chestnut Street that freezing December dawn. Micro-communities never just forget a tragedy. These locals carry the ghost of Haley like a permanent scar, haunted by the little girl they completely failed to save, swimming in shared guilt, blinding grief, and a vicious refusal to sleep until the real killer pays the price. Because when you finally pull back the curtain and stare at the gruesome entirety of this timeline, one terrifying truth emerges. They were not missing the clues. They knew exactly who the monster was. Detectives had their primary target dead to rights from day one. Those digital pings practically screamed his guilt. His alibis crumbled upon inspection, while the lie detector exposed massive deception. The main person of interest literally pinpointed the specific county where they eventually unearthed her bones, a glaring red flag waving right from the start. Yet somehow, thanks to a brutal mix of forensic shortcomings, massive courtroom hurdles, and potentially disastrous moves made during those crucial initial hours, closure for Haley Dunn continues slipping through the cracks. This is way bigger than some courtroom failure. It is a devastating human tragedy that utterly destroyed an actual family breathing the dusty air of a quiet West Texas community. That raw agony is exactly why we obsess over these mysteries, digging way deeper than sterile evidence boxes and rigid chronologies. Because lurking behind every single frozen investigation, behind every nameless murder database, beneath every stale bounty fund gathering cobwebs, stands someone like Clint Dunn, a desperate dad haunting his front porch, aggressively hunting for truth, refusing to let society move on. Haley entered this world on August 28, 1997, right in Colorado City. She hyped up crowds on the sidelines, blew the sacks, and completely dominated on the court and the diamond. This kid absolutely adored her classes, cherished her crew, and idolized her dad enough to literally cross town just to hug him daily. Barely 13 years of age, a ruthless predator coldly determined she no longer deserved to breathe. She earned a much brighter future than that brutal end, and she certainly merits way more than this broken legal machine has managed to scrape together. Consider this film her official testament. However, it serves as a screaming alarm that her final chapter remains completely unwritten. Detectives are still hunting. The primary target remains identical. Her bloodline absolutely refuses to surrender. Meanwhile, hiding in the shadows, a single person holds the exact puzzle piece needed to blow this wide open. Anyone harboring dark secrets regarding how Haley vanished and perished needs to step up. The Texas Rangers are aggressively hunting for new leads. Anonymous hotlines are fully operational, while her father keeps relentlessly blasting out updates, constantly dialing numbers, and warring for his little girl precisely like he has since December 28, 2010. Because real protectors never quit, and that relentless pursuit of truth is exactly what she earned. The tragic vanishing of 13-year-old Haley Dunn from her Texas home is a haunting reminder that in a world of routine mornings, evil can strike with chilling precision. Haley was the vibrant heartbeat of her community, a saxophone player and cheerleader whose spirit could light up any room. Yet, her life was stolen by a predator hiding behind a facade of domestic normalcy. This story serves as a harrowing lesson. Complacency is the greatest ally of a predator. While a town slept with unlocked doors, a monster moved in the shadows. We must learn to listen to the whispers of the vulnerable. Haley's own fear of a dark figure outside her door was a silent scream for help that the world missed until it was too late. However, Haley's legacy is defined by the unbreakable fire of a father's love. For over a decade, Clint Dunn refused to let his daughter become a dusty file in a basement. He proved that justice is not just a legal process, but a relentless crusade against bureaucratic silence. Never silence your intuition, and never stop fighting for the truth. Even when years bleed into a creeping rot of agony, persistence can eventually unearth the darkest secrets. Let us honor Haley by guarding our children with fierce vigilance and vowing that no monster should ever breathe free air while a family's heart remains shattered.